Hello, everyone, and welcome to Career Pathways for Women in Tech. We are so glad that you're here. My name is Molly Mitchell, and I'm the Student Outreach Coordinator for the SciTech Internship Program. The Minnesota Technology Association is the home of SciTech, and together we will be the hosts for today's event. If you or someone you know is a college student majoring in a STEM field, you should know about SciTech. We help connect STEM students to paid internships in small Minnesota companies, and this is a great resource to find hands-on experience, especially in the tech industry. You can learn more at our website, which is scitechmn.org. And today we have three wonderful speakers who are here to talk to you all about how they broadened their horizons and pursued a career in technology. And we're so excited to hear their stories and invite you to ask questions for the panel using the chat feature. Now let's meet our panel. Ayaan Dahir is a human-centered designer at Software for Good and a community organizer. She is a University of Minnesota and Prime Digital Academy alum, and she has a passion for people, storytelling, and tackling complex challenges. Welcome, Ayaan. Elizabeth Chapman is Art Unlimited's Chief Financial Officer and Business Analyst. She's a graduate of the University of Minnesota with a degree in Business Administration, and she enjoys being outdoors, running sled dogs, and training her border collies. Welcome, Elizabeth. We're glad you're here. And Maria Burns Ortiz is the co-founder and CEO of 7 Generation Games, a video game studio making immersive educational games and interactive apps with a mission of breaking down barriers to success, one math problem at a time. Previously, Maria was a multimedia journalist and New York Times bestselling author, and this year she was recognized as one of Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal's 40 Under 40. Welcome, Maria. Welcome all of the panelists, and welcome to our audience. I will now get started with the question portion, and at the end we'll have some time for audience questions. So if you think of something during the time that the panelists are speaking, feel free to write any questions in the chat when they come up, and let's get started. Panelists, whoever wants to take the first question is free to get started. Let me close this quick. All right, my first question is, what got you interested in technology, and can you describe your career path so far? Whoever wants to take it.
Well, I will jump in. So yeah, I'm Maria Burns Ortiz. You know, I think back to what got me interested in tech, and it was actually a class I took my last semester of college. I went to NYU, I was a journalism major, and we had this class, it was called digital journalism, and nobody knew what that meant, right, at all. They were like, we all got in this class, it was the very first time it been offered, and we were asking each other, like, what is this? And we had no idea. And it was like the early 2000s, and I remember the teacher was like, who knows what a blog is? And we all kind of were like, I've heard of it. But so the whole point of that class, it wasn't really journalism and reporting, but it was learning all of these new technologies. How do you do things? You know, how do you create a website? How do you post stories? And one of the things that I remember was he had this exercise. We had to actually build our own web page and do all this stuff. And then we were like, this is really a lot, because none of us had ever done anything as far as technology related classes. And then the next week or 2 weeks later, we used Blogger, which was like this site, and it made it 100 times easier. But I started to see through that opportunity, you know, one, the power of technology in storytelling, which ultimately many years later led to what I do now, but also kind of this value of how technology is always constantly evolving, right? Because his whole thing was, I wanted you to see how hard it was, and then I wanted you to see how technology keeps making it easier and better, and new things keep coming out. Really cool. And I saw how it was opening doors and opportunities, especially for more and more people to get involved in technology. And it kind of flipped a switch for me as this is something really cool. And so what it is asking too is our career path so far. So I started on that, and then I got into digital media and digital journalism and was doing multimedia storytelling. And then from there, I kind of had been in media for a long time. I was at ESPN for a while, ESPN.com. And then my co-founder said, you know, we really want to do something different. So one of them was a statistician who'd been in academia. Another one was at Raytheon doing simulation software for the defense industry. I'd been at ESPN.com, and the three of us basically said, we want to do something different. And I don't want to say better, but in a way that we felt have more of an impact. And so for us, we decided, how could we do that? And creating software that would teach kids, and we work really with underrepresented communities and closing the math gap. We saw the power of technology to be able to do that. And so that's kind of how I did it. It's one of those things that I always think when people are talking about careers in tech, it's really shifting, right? Like there's certainly this very linear path that some people take. But for example, if you had asked me, would I be doing this 15 years later? The answer is, I would have thought you were crazy. Or, I think a lot of times people come like, I don't have a computer science degree, or I don't have an engineering background. How can I get into this field? And so I think when I talk about my career path, I always say it's atypical, but I think we're seeing more and more people taking that atypical path. And I think that's because they bring different background perspectives into tech companies.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, I can answer. So hello, everyone. My name is Ayaan Dahir. And Maria, what you said is absolutely true, that, a lot of people don't have a linear path into tech. And I think that's really important for, folks to understand and to talk about. And so I certainly didn't have a linear path. So I'll describe my career path a bit, and that'll kind of answer the question. So I went to school for psychology, and for a long time I thought I would be working in clinical psychology. And then while I was in school, I got into community organizing and doing community work, working with different communities around civil rights and liberties. And the way that I interacted with tech and data in tech, it was in two ways. So the first way was as a tool to educate, empower, and mobilize people. And the other way was around, surveillance and facial recognition and all these different ways that, tech can be, detrimental and, can target communities. And so for a long time, that was my experience with tech. And so my sister's an engineer, and, we were having a conversation, and we were talking about design and UX design, right? And that's what I am. I think that was mentioned before. I'm a designer. And so that's when I started thinking about, having this sense of, how do we design technology? How do we design things for good? And it's pretty cool that I ended up at Software for Good. But from there, I enrolled in Prime Digital Academy, which was a really cool place, and a place where is maybe the best place to understand that a lot of people's introduction into tech is not linear, and their career path is not linear. And so from there, I worked with local organizations around design. And eventually I started working at Software for Good. And for me, the reason I was interested and hesitant in design was I was conflicted with the power of technology and data, and how that can be harnessed for good. And, being intentional about, not just, can we make something that is addictive? Can we make something that gets us the most profit? But can we create things that actually improve the quality of people's lives? Are we thinking about the impact? And so when I found that that was actually a viable thing, that I could do both things at once, that's when I really launched into it. And so, for me, again, it wasn't linear. It was something that, it took a long, different path, and where I'll be in 5 or 10 years, I'm not sure, but I'm open to that. And I really want to see more people in tech that, didn't always consider tech as a place for them and as a career path, because I think those different ideas and the different design processes and the ways that people come to a problem are what's needed to create better, a better world, essentially. So, yeah.
All right. Well, first, thank you, SciTech, for facilitating this discussion. I am always excited to discuss the career pathways for everyone in technology. And I'm blessed to be able to present with these wonderful ladies as well. So technology, a lot of people don't consider it as a career path, especially oftentimes for the female segment of our population. They don't automatically think of the STEM field, though I think that's changing as people get more aware of the diversity involved in technology. It's not all coding and spending your time looking at a computer 24 hours a day. But for myself, I got interested in technology due to my parents. My parents are very interesting and unique people. My dad is an industrial and fine arts designer, and my mom is an educator. So those two things coupled together with technology, they both love technology, allowed myself and my two sisters to be raised in a culture and environment that fostered critical thinking and exploring things outside of the typical box. So they privately educated us, and we got exposed to some wonderful things growing up, including my dad trying to code on a computer with a cassette tape. So if anyone remembers way back in the day where you would have to enter all this code, and if you missed a period or a slash, backslash, everything died. And that was his first experience in coding and technology, and we got to watch that as little kids. So we just had technology around us all the time. He had one of the first computers. And from there, we were always exposed to entrepreneurship and working with our mom and dad in the business that they started. And so that really fostered technology and getting hands-on experience with business and helping others with the products and services that we could do. My career path personally was enhanced by the fact that through technology, I could continue to live in Greater Minnesota. Our business is located an hour and a half south of the Canadian border. So we are one of those wild companies that are in the woods, enjoying the lakes and rocks and trees, and still involved in technology. So because I like the outdoors so much, I attended the University of Minnesota with one of their first remote online degrees. I was one of the first students that graduated from the University of Minnesota with my degree entirely online. And so that was my first experience in remote distance learning on internet. In fact, I had to get extensions to test times because I was on dial-up internet. That's probably dates me, but so once I completed my degree, then I used it in helping develop several businesses, and then at the same time working in the family business. And currently now we have a complete team of technology experts building software like my other two co-hosts and creating fantastic products that help improve people's lives. And also now one of the few certified women-owned technology companies in the state of Minnesota with our number of employee base and revenue. So we're very blessed. And if I can do it, anybody can.
Fantastic, great answers. It was nice to hear about all of your, I guess, career upbringing in tech. That's really great. My next question, which I think, Elizabeth, you kind of touched on, tech is a space that is still predominantly male. And so what skills have you developed that help you navigate your career as a woman in tech? If you want, we can just go in the same order, and we can start with Maria.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think there's two different skill sets, right? And I think one of the skill sets, and this is not just for women in tech, but I think anyone, is just always learning and being able to learn what's next, right? And I mean that because, what we use 5 years ago is different from what we're using today. What we're going to use 10 years from now is different from what we're using today, right? And so a lot of, especially in technology, things build on each other. So whatever, if it's, new languages or new platforms, or they leverage a lot from what previously is there. But I think especially what sometimes I've seen be really detrimental is people who are like, I know this one thing and I know it really well, and that's it, right? And so for me, when I think about what has enabled me to kind of advance, is the ability to pick up new things, new softwares, new skills. All of that is probably, I think, the most important career in tech, because it does shift so rapidly and it's going to continue to evolve. So that is on the professional end, just always being, willing, I think, is a big part of it too. Like sometimes it's scary, and I have a image I use where when I'm doing training, it was like learning a new software is like riding a bike, right? And people act like it's so easy, but it's, that it's like, but it's like riding a bike, only the bike's on fire and you're on fire and everything's on fire, right? Because people always act like it's so easy to pick this new thing up, but it isn't, right? So, but it gets easier over time. And so I think that's one of the biggest things I think is learning new skills and realizing that, and I say this as someone that makes software, it's never as easy to pick up as the developers swear to you that it will be, right? And so that's part of that process. I think on a personal level, I think, and it's hard to do sometimes, but right, tech is predominantly men. It's shifting, thankfully, but it's not anywhere near what actually society is reflective of. I came in this weird way. Like I said, I came from sports media, and that's almost all men as well, right? And I remember people would always say, "Wow, that's tough. You got to be the only woman. You got to." And I said, "I guess, but like, there's never a line for the bathroom when you go to events, things like that." So I started trying to think of, like, instead of flipping about those things that's so difficult and negative, finding those ways that, one, you don't let it get to you, and that can be hard because I don't want to say I'm still angry, but like a couple of years ago, I was at this event in DC. It was just tech leaders. It was all these things. And I'm sitting next to this person at the table, and they turned to me and we were talking about what we do. And they said, "Oh, you know a lot about this company. Are you in marketing?" And I remember saying, like, this isn't, someone next to him, thankfully, was a woman next to him, and like nudged him and was like, "Are you kidding?" Like, because it was an event for tech CEOs, right? Like, we're sitting at this, but there's a lot of that goes on. And you need to be able to kind of brush that off in a way. And I don't brush it off like, "Hey, no big deal." I think, we need to start changing that discussion. And it can be hard. I'm the kind of person that's like, I don't want to say I don't let that bother me, but I know that there's a lot of women, and when we bring women into our company, that's kind of a hard discussion to have, like, people sometimes will act like you shouldn't be here, or you're going to know less, or you're going to do all these things. And I always say those people are idiots, right? But, not letting that get to you and not letting that bother you and building that up, I think that is something that, is a skill, right? And it takes it, we're grown up, and I do think that we're shifting that a little bit. I have a girl, my old daughter going into high school, and I'll never forget, she came home in 3rd grade one day and said to me, "Do you know that people think that girls are not as good at math? Like, have you ever heard this?" And she was irate, right? And that's what I wanted, right? Like, she was like, "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." So I think we are seeing a little bit of a shift in that. But we also know that there's lots of data that shows, like, as they go through high school, as they go through college, women are, and once they get into the actual field, right? I mean, women are compared and judged differently. And so I think, one, being aware of that is important so that you can call it out when it happens. And two, you can be bothered by it, but don't let it discourage you. And I think those skills sometimes are as important as like the technical skills that we push, because it's how do you move forward in your career, and how do you make sure that you know that you belong here, whether you sometimes feel like you're getting messaging of well, do you know this, do you know that? So those are kind of my professional / personal type skills that I think have been really important and valuable.
Yeah, I totally agree with Maria there. I think the number one skill that anyone can have in tech and should honestly value is that ability to adapt and pivot as you go in your career, as you advance yourself, right? And the reason why, of course, is, again, those tools and different things that we're using are, can be ancient in like a super short amount of time. But and also, as you go, as a designer, there are lots of different design processes, techniques, different things that are, coming out. There are ways people are improving upon, different, processes and different things like that. And so you need to be able to, learn as you go and get crafty and sort of immerse yourself in this new forms of, knowledge and tools and stuff. And so I think being able to make yourself competitive is really important too, right? And so what works for excuse me, one company is not going to be the same thing that works for another company or another team, and so you need to be able to pivot yourself, right, to whatever those skills and tools and technologies are. And sometimes it's not going to work, but I think being open-minded and like not limiting yourself is very, very important, because yes, things are hard to learn and they take time. But if that's a value you have for yourself in the beginning, then it's going to be easier as you go, because when something new comes up, when there's a new tool, when there's something else going on, you're not going to have this like mental block of, I only know XYZ, I can't learn this thing, right? And so I think a lot of that is overcoming your own limits that you put on yourself, and being willing and open-minded to learn and be bad at something and eventually improve with repetition. So that's one thing. And the second thing I would say is just knowing your worth, and being able to sort of advocate for yourself. I think that's really important. One experience I had early on was, talking to a tech recruiter and, sharing my resume and my different, information and different qualifications and things like that. And then having an idea of, okay, this is where I want to start in terms of salary, and then being told, okay, that sounds good, but it's actually, it might make more sense to, to start here. And so a part of that is just knowing for yourself, like, what is the market offering, and then what can I bring to the table, and then being able to sort of trust that eventually you can get what you're looking for. You can get pretty close to it. And that sounds pretty risky, definitely in this economy and, while we're going through this pandemic. But I think it's important to know your worth and know how to advocate for yourself, because essentially no one else is going to do that for you, right? And it's so easy to advocate for other people, especially as designers and probably as women, but it's equally important to be able to do that for yourself. So yeah, that's what I would say. Those skills are really important to develop. So knowing your worth and being able to adapt and pivot as you go.
These ladies have some good tips. My tips to add, I like practical things that you can take away. I think women in technology, we have the unique capability of multitasking, right? So our male counterparts, they're not so good at that. Even though they may say they're really good at it, they're not so good. So I think that we bring that to the table because we can juggle a lot of different things in technology. And technology, like Maria mentioned, changes quite quickly. So being able to multitask and adapt and change, that's a unique trait that women really bring to the table. And we have to emphasize that and recognize that and say we're good at that. We do that every day. So that's something we bring to technology. I think also the fact that we have a different perspective, that has really helped. And we know that technology is used a lot by women. So when you're involved in technology, we bring that unique perspective of the end user, which is who buys technology. And so that's a trait we can say, whether we're looking for a job, whether we're bringing investors to the table, whether we're selling our products, we can say we have a unique perspective and we really know our end user, because we have all types of developers and or marketers or business owners looking at this product. So I think we don't put yourself down if you're a woman in technology. We bring unique things to the table. And to be honest, I think my sister and I, as we lead our company, we've decided if you do something well, people really don't care who's behind the product or behind the service. They want a good product, a good service with clear communication that meets their needs. And if you can do that, you're fine. So keep up the good work. Good information here.
Thanks, everyone. That's really great advice. I'm going to touch on something that Ayaan mentioned and go into our next question, which is, what advice do you have for women who are searching for jobs right now during the pandemic? I know, Ayaan, you said it's a little bit challenging right now with the economy, and a lot of people are looking for a new position or have been unemployed for a while. So what advice would you have for those women?
Are we still going in order, or can we just jump in? Okay, I guess I'll just, I'll just jump in. So yeah, a little bit of what I said earlier about just knowing your worth and knowing how to advocate for yourself, but then also being patient and knowing that it'll, things are not going to go probably on the schedule. It rarely does for anyone. And so being patient, but just continuing to apply yourself, working on, different projects and different things like that, and being able to show your process and the way that you problem solve and being able to communicate that effectively, I think is really, really important. And so, I would say just to continue to advocate for yourself, to know your worth, to be competitive by, being able to, articulate your ideas well, as well as being able to, know what companies are looking for, doing some research there, knowing who you're applying to and doing some research there as well. And just knowing who's the audience and who you're talking to, and knowing what is it exactly that they're looking for and what can you bring to the table. And then from that place, knowing, how to speak to your ideas and your history and the different things that you bring to the table. And then when you land that job, being able to negotiate is really important. A lot of women don't negotiate from the beginning. And so that actually puts us at a disadvantage career-wise, because it's very hard to catch up once you start at a certain salary level. And so being able from the beginning, again, it really ties into that, knowing your worth, being able to advocate, and then being comfortable negotiating. So I know a lot of us are Minnesotans and we're really nice and polite. And we somehow, sometimes we think negotiating is rude, but it's absolutely not. Companies expect you to negotiate, and when you're at that point in the process, you're not working against the person, the company you're talking to. You're working together to find, to set a specific standard or to create an agreement or a compromise that works well for all parties involved. And so when you're at that point, knowing to negotiate is really important. And just, I think starting from there is, something that we can all learn from, not just women, but I would say especially women, and especially if you're Minnesotan, to, put yourself out there and negotiate. That's only going to help you in your career from the beginning. So, feel comfortable, doing something that's uncomfortable, but do it anyway, because it's for the good of you, but also it's in the best interest of the company too, to make sure that you're, happy, and that, that you're being compensated fairly for your work. So, yeah.
I guess I can jump in. So I have two, and one I want to jump on what she was just said, but I was going to start with saying, first thing I would say is apply, right? There's a lot of data that shows that like people look at an application, so like I hit 75, 80% of the things in that post, applied maybe 50%, right? And that women will only apply if they hit, 95%. And even then, sometimes they'll say, well, it says, fluent in, and I'm pretty proficient, or whatever it is. So the first thing I always say is apply, because women tend to undersell themselves where men, tend to oversell themselves. And that's just my opinion. There's a lot of data backing that up, right? And so apply. That's the first piece of advice I get, because a lot of times that's pretty much the only way you're going to get you to that next step. And I think, I said something about, knowing the company that you're applying for. And I think that's a really important thing. And I personally loathe, and I always hated salary negotiations. And so when someone comes to our company, I say, usually very early on in the process, we usually post, I say, this is, I have gone through and I have gotten all of the money I literally possibly could give to this position, and we're making that offer up front. And so I'm very clear in that in interviews too, is, here's what we're paying. This is literally all I have. And because I also think, as a business owner, I want people to know, I'm not trying to lowball them. I want to get the best possible, folks in. And so for us, then, that removes that from the table. But we have had people who before, when I kind of start with that, and then later have come back and said, okay, we've gone through the process. They say, I accept the position, but I want to negotiate. I say, so sometimes it's also understanding the companies and in the process and listening when they're talking. Because I said, well, I know we would love to pay more. We'd love to pay Microsoft wages or whatever they're paying at Facebook. We're a smaller company. We don't have that. So that's, something that we talk about. But also I'd say, think about and ask about in the process, if they don't bring it up, other things that they offer. So we have a lot of other things we try and offer. We promise that we'll send them to, a conference nationally during, the course of a year for professional development. Before, everybody was always working from home, a lot of flexibility in terms of a hybrid work model. And so there's certain things about that I would say to look into as well. And so I certainly say advocate for the most salary possible, but then when you're in conversations, understand the employers, and sometimes too, and say, don't take personally if they say, we literally do not have any more money to give you. I would give everybody more money if I could. But sometimes it's just, at the end of the day, this is how much we have, or nobody else, and so I think keeping that in mind too. So I always think negotiating is good. Just also don't take it personal if they say we can't give you more than that. And I said, my biggest thing is apply, because you're never going to get a job. I mean, sure, sometimes a recruiter will call you and up and say, but the vast majority of times, you're not going to get a job if you don't apply. And so that's that first step to get in the door.
Yes, I agree with all of those wonderful tips. I think one thing too is make sure your resume reflects what you've actually done. I see a lot of female resumes versus male resumes. The female applicants have done a lot more than what that's listed on their resume. So if you do volunteer work, if you've organized a humongous banquet for your kids' hockey team, and you integrated multiple sponsors and promotional campaign, put that on your volunteer section of your resume. That really impacts when I look at people's skill set. I'm like, oh, well, they're really good at organizing and events and managing multiple personalities. And if they can do that as a volunteer, well, then they can probably even do it better if they're paid and they have a budget to go along with that, and they have partners who really want to work with them. So I think don't sell yourself short on what you put on your resume, even if it's not a paid position. Another thing that I look at when I am hiring someone is, have they continued their education? Did they just do their degree and then never did any other additional certifications, courses, things like that? If you've been continuing to improve yourself, taken multiple different certifications, or added to your list of programming languages or communication skill sets, feel free to include that on your resume as well, because that's important. I like to look for a learner. And then, like the ladies said, do your research on the company that you're looking for, and feel free to bring up, say, boy, I really noticed on your website that you really like to include and embrace different STEM fields. And I've done some research on this. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you've used that in your company? So bring that personal touch when you get a job interview or when you write your cover letter. You know, if you write your cover letter and bring something specific up about the company and it's not just a blank generic one, I'm going to take a second look at that and say, boy, their resume is not quite as strong as this other applicant, but they took time to look at our company. They took time to bring something personal to the table. And that means they're really interested and they really want to put their best foot forward. And they've taken they've taken that extra step. And that's what an employer is really looking for. So if you've been laid off for the whole year, make sure that you say what you've been doing for the whole year. If you've been sitting on a beach drinking coffee all year, then you're probably not a good fit in technology because you have not wanted to change for a whole year. But if you've taken 5 courses and learned 2 new programming languages, or you've redesigned your company's website or your personal website, that's what I want to see. So bring those things to the table, and employers are willing and interested in them. And we hire people with no degrees. If they're a go-getter and they want to learn, our company likes those types of personality traits.
Well, and I was just going to jump in on something Elizabeth said, because you would be amazed by how often people apply for jobs, at least I have been amazed, that didn't really look that much at the site, that come in and are kind of like, so what is it that you guys make? And I'm like, you're applying for a job with us and you want us to tell you about what it is that we do. And I want to say I'm surprised, but it's happened so many times that I see the other folks out here nodding that, you know, literally that gives you an edge. If you come in and you know what the company that you are applying at a job for does, so that seems like a really quick, easy way to get an extra edge. So I certainly emphasize and encourage that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Oh, Ayaan, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I think Megan made a really good point in the chat. She said, I've been in technology and higher ed for a number of years. What I noticed, especially in my career, especially earlier in my career, is that men were encouraged and supported regardless of ability and existing skills, while I was overlooked or denied educational resources. I see that even now in terms of new hires, and now that I'm older, I wonder if ageism adds to some of the limitations or skewed opportunities I may be experiencing. So I thought that was an excellent point. And from the side of employees, it's something that I've definitely seen where certain some companies and some, whether that's in recruiting or whether that's the actual company itself, people are willing to invest, should I say, in certain employees, right? Whether they have those qualifications or not, whether that's mentorship, whether that's being more lenient about, well, these are the tools that we use, this is our experience, this is what we do, but if you have this, we'll kind of work with you and we'll take some time, a few months or however long that takes to teach you our tools and our, different things that we do. And, we'll sort of take you under that wing, even though you don't have the qualifications that we're necessarily looking for, as opposed to other candidates. They're expected to have, those qualifications, those languages, those tools, whatever it is, prepared, like pre-assembled, should I say, like right before you, as you come to the table. And so I think that's something that employers need to be thinking about, is who is being, who are the people that we're willing to invest in, and who are the people that we're insisting that they have everything we're looking for, from the beginning. And so I think that's a conversation that we need to have. I've noticed that certain companies are not requiring degrees anymore because they understand in technology, it's the experience that matters. You don't necessarily need a software degree or a degree in design or, something like that, as long as you have that experience, the knowledge, those qualifications, whatever. And so I think we need to expand that as well and be more honest about the hiring process and start talking about, who are we being more lenient on? What are the investments that are happening in the back that, can just honestly be accounted to, just our own human, should I say flaws or faults or whatever that word is, or preferences, whatever we want to use, but ultimately don't necessarily improve the workforce or company, because then we're missing out on talent that just needs some investment, right, from the company, but can turn out to be a huge asset, right, in a short amount of time or over the long period, right? And so I think that's a conversation we need to be having too. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Megan.
And I totally agree. And that's something you see in tech startups and funding all the time, right? Like some dudes get funded with an idea written on a napkin, and then women are told, you don't have 4 million users. And it's like, but you might, maybe you have revenue and you have 100,000, but it's not, And so that is across tech a major issue that I don't, if I had the solution to, I wish. But that is something that I think the more and more though that we confront it and call it out and point it out and look at, like, are we judging one set of candidates on their potential and another set on their actual skills? My potential could be to have 1 billion users. You know what I mean? If we're just potential is just a guess of what someone thinks you're going to accomplish as opposed to skills. And I think we really need to be pushing to be mindful of, like, what are we judging everyone on? Are we judging them all on the same scale? Because it certainly seems, I think a lot of people say, there's different scales for different people. And so I think that's a really important thing. And I think one thing too that we at least think about when we're looking at hires is, like, there's certainly, we want to invest in some of these younger people or ages and things, right? Like, is what you'll hear. But, we think too, is like, look at, when you're talking about onboarding, right? Like, oh, I know that I can pick this up faster. I bring this experience, and highlighting some of those things I think can be valuable because, I have a proven track record of working independently, and kind of building those things out can be a good way to look at, what skills from having more experience, right? And not just the papers, what's exactly in the resume, but some of those more intangible skills that can be really valuable. Because if I know I'm going to have to handhold this new person that has 0 work experience, but I know I can bring this other person and they can hit the ground running and work really independently, that really is going to balance, I would say tip it in that one person's favor. So really being mindful of what those skills are that can be brought with experience, but also just realizing that, yeah, some of this needs to change. And I think the more people call it out and the more voices there are adding to that conversation, hopefully faster that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for your advice and your insights. I would like to move now to some audience questions. So if you've been listening and thought of some questions for our panelists, please feel free to add them in the chat and I will read them out loud. We may not get to all of them, but I'm going to do my best. So I'm going to start with the first question, which was, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but is it possible to get a job in software without a degree?
I would say yes. We hire people without degrees. What we want to see is that they can do the work. And so if they have a resume with links or applicable job samples that they have successfully done the work, they will be considered to the same level as someone who has a degree. Practical application of skill sets is probably the most important thing in technology, because people can say they do something, but if they can prove they can do it, that's always a better set.
Yeah, we always ask people to bring an example of something that you did, right? And not just that, because we a lot of the things we've done, we've learned over time, right? Like, show me something that you did. We've now made it walk me through this process, right? So not just, because sometimes someone will say, and it was a team thing, that maybe they weren't the most active member on the team, right? But so if you're looking for something, and especially if you don't have some, like a degree, bringing actual specific examples of your work and being able to then walk through the code and talk through it to show that you have an understanding of it, something like that is really valuable. So I would say, I think most the folks that we do have degrees, to be completely honest, but we have had some people in the past that didn't. But that was the thing, is walk me through this, tell me about it, be able to show that you have a mastery of it in some way if you don't have a degree. And also, to be fair, we've had people that have degrees and we've seen some of their work and that was questionable too. So it's not an either or, but I think part of what a degree does is it demonstrates that you should have some of these skills, right? And so if you're able to demonstrate it in other ways, that can certainly, balance some of that out.
If anyone has any questions, please throw them out in the chat. Otherwise, I just have kind of a fun question for you panelists. What is your favorite part of your job?
I think the favorite part of my job is the people. Technology has a diverse collection of people, and I enjoy getting to learn all about them, assisting them, the privilege of leading them, and learning about our clients as well.
See, that's a good one. Now I feel bad because I was going to say, but yeah, the people obviously as I'm going to steal that, but I'd say besides the people, because Elizabeth hit on really good parts of that. What I love about what we do, and we work with kids improving math scores, right? But one of the things that I love is we're creating education. And we have a lot of data. It shows that they're helping solve the problem we're trying to solve, and so we feel good about that. But the coolest part of my job, and I work starting, I mean, as CEO, I kind of oversee all of it, but I work leading our creative team, and so coming from something literally in our heads that doesn't actually, that's not a thing, it's just an idea that we have, and being able to take that and walk that through all of the steps into actually becoming a game that kids all over the country get to hold and play in their hands and see this thing that was only in your imagination, a real thing that people are now enabled with. I just think that's so cool because it's, it's your imagination and now it's real. And that's one of the really cool, fun things about technology is you get to not just be part of, doing something, but creating things, and to see that come to is one of the funnest things I think we get to do.
Yeah. Maria, you took my answer and Elizabeth, you took mine too. So I guess if I'm not talking about the people, which, the really awesome people I get to work with on my team, as well as the wonderful clients we have and all the users that we touch, I would definitely say I really enjoy the problem solving aspect of design. So in my role, I'm in the strategy design aspect of a project. And so I'm at the very beginning of it. I'm there during, our kickoffs and working with the client. And as we're just beginning to understand what is this, concept or problem and what is this problem space that we're in. And so it's really cool for me to see that, those ideas become products at the end, and not just the end, but the whole process, right? These, different iterations and, being able to go back to the table and adjust what's needed. And also the research and the user testing part of it is really exciting for me. I love being able to, support my decisions and things that make sense based off data and research. And so I really enjoy, picking people's brains and, figuring out, what makes the most sense for this product, and being able to sort of juggle those two things, the users and the clients, and making sure that, everybody's happy to as much extent as we can actually. So I really enjoy that problem solving aspect and seeing an idea come to life. It's really exciting. And sometimes it takes a long time, but that probably makes it even better when it's all said and done. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's really interesting that all three of you would say people, and I think that's really cool. We have a question in the chat that says, you mentioned that even if you don't have the requirements of the job description, it's still important to apply. Can you provide your thoughts on how to overcome an automated resume reader? Larger companies are using these more and more to weed people out before human touch can have an impact on the hireability of an applicant. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
think, and having been in technology and worked in corporate sectors before, I think the reality is it's terrible, but to find a way to try and get a human, right? And I know it's really annoying, but LinkedIn has made it a lot easier in some ways. Like, do you know someone that knows someone, right? I think even with those companies that are using those large readers, I'm not, but I would assume the vast majority of jobs are really coming from someone who knew someone that was able to put them in touch and say, hey, can you check this resume? And I think there's a lot of inherent unfairness to that. I'm not going to argue about that, but it also is one of those things that is just the realities of it. So I think, very rarely, actually even look at my career, like one time in my life did I ever get a call back from a resume that I submitted to someone that I had zero connection with, right? It was always about how can you find someone that maybe puts in a word, can just say, hey, can you double check this? And so I think, and also from a hiring standpoint, sometimes we get resumes and I can tell they've just been written because they're what they're sending out to other people to kind of try and scam the automated resume reader, and it's just word. And so I don't know that those work any better. So I think the big thing I would say is see whatever way you can do to see if you can find some kind of a human contact, or even if you don't have them, try and see who that person might be hiring wise. But LinkedIn can be a good way to see people that you might have a connection to, or a one person away connection to, because I think there's not really a replacement for that human kind of touch point to get that through.
Yeah, Maria's absolutely right. So an example that I can think of is, there can be a job that you're applying to that requires 3 years of experience. And if you don't have those 3 years in this like specific thing that they're looking for, you're gonna get weeded out immediately, right? Through that technology. And so, you might have 2 years experience, but you've worked on, 15 projects or something, right? Should that disqualify somebody? I don't think so. But that's what would happen. And so again, what you need to do for sure is try to get in front of like a person somehow. So whether that's knowing somebody at this company, or let's say instead of applying directly yourself through, just cold applying through the company or on LinkedIn, you can, is there a recruiter that's looking to fill this position? Maybe go through them, because they might be able to speak some words, as a person to whoever is hiring at that company, and that might give you the edge to have your application looked at before it's chucked out, unfortunately. So try to get in front of a person, and then if you're on LinkedIn, and you can hire through LinkedIn, try to go to the company and hire through the company. Try to apply through the company if you're still gonna cold apply, because some companies like that better, that you're not just on LinkedIn applying to 10 jobs or whatever, but you went out of your way to go to the company website and apply through them. So you might even be put in a different bucket or category because of that. So try to find a way to, basically finesse the system. Because the thing is you don't need, 1,000 companies to hire you. You just need that one person, right? So try to find that one person that'll help you get your foot through the door. Yeah.
And don't discount mailing something or going in person. There's very few people that now mail things or come to the office. If they come to the office, that they mail something and they apply electronically, I'm like, this person really wants to work here. And if they know about our company, I'm like, this is a good candidate. We need to take a second look at them.
Great advice. Thanks, everyone. We have another question here that is, what do you feel is a company's responsibility for training their employees to upskill as technical requirements change so quickly? And we have just a couple more minutes, so quick answers, please, if possible.
We think it's really important. I mean, that's why I was saying we offer part of that as what our staff does. We say, also we get, so, we'll pay for training class type things, or we'll send them to conferences. We also give folks 10% of their time per week to work on something that's relevant to what we do, not just like, oh, my side hustle, but relevant to what we do, but interesting to them to be able to develop those skills. And I think it's a really valuable way to not just train your employees, but keep them, right? Because me as a company, I don't want my staff to get bored and miserable and go look for something else. And I think if they feel like they're growing and developing, they're a lot more likely to stay with us. And so I think it is definitely a company's responsibility if they want to keep their staff. Especially if they don't have if you have huge amounts of money, then maybe you can keep them other ways. But yeah, I think it's a valuable tool.
I think it depends on the company culture. So whatever you feel is a good fit with your personal goals and values is what you should align yourself with the company. And if they are a culture of learning and they're a culture of building people up and encouraging and growing their team, then they're going to naturally do that for their team. It's not going to be a responsibility per se, but ultimately it's your personal responsibility to make sure that you are as proficient and as skilled as possible, whether that's using your current job and or doing things on the side. You know, if I have an employee that comes to me and says, you know, on the side, I've learned this and this, and I've worked on this project, I have this idea about how we can do this as a company. It really fits this new way things are moving. I'm gonna be like, you really take some initiative. You've brought something new to the table. And if they also couple that with, let's try it. And then if it works really good, then maybe we can talk about my role, my position, my compensation, my benefits. I'm gonna be like, yeah, you've put some work in here. And you've taken some personal ownership of this. I think that's important. It's not all about the company. It's about you yourself as well.
All right, awesome. I am going to close us off here really quick just because we're running out of time. But thank you guys so much for your responses, and thanks everyone for the great questions. One other resource that I'd like to mention before we close today is that in addition to the SciTech Internship Program, the Minnesota Technology Association has a brand new job board where you can find great tech job opportunities right here, right now. And you can check it out. It's on the slide there at careers.mntech.org. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us. We appreciate your time and we hope that you learned something new. The recording for today's event will be available soon on scitechmn.org on our blog. So for those of you who maybe came in a little late or missed something or you want to watch again, you can do that next week or share with your networks. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday.